Senator John Kennedy has built a reputation for cutting through political posturing with a style that blends Southern charm with razor-sharp interrogation. His approach isn't about grandstanding or theatrical outrage, it's about precision. He asks direct, often uncomfortable questions in a way that leaves little room for evasion. And in the case of Adam Schiff's sudden freeze on live TV, Kennedy's tactic wasn't just effective, it was devastating. What made this moment different from other political clashes was Kennedy's preparation. He didn't stumble into a gotcha moment by accident. He had clearly done his homework. Schiff, a seasoned politician known for his measured responses and legalistic defenses, is rarely caught off balance. But Kennedy's line of questioning bypassed Schiff's usual defenses entirely. Instead of engaging in a debate over policy or partisan rhetoric, Kennedy went straight for Schiff's past, something Schiff clearly hadn't expected to be confronted about in such a public setting. The exact nature of what Kennedy referenced remains unclear, but the effect was undeniable. Some speculate it involved Schiff's financial disclosures, others whisper about old political alliances that contradict his current image. Whatever it was, Kennedy presented it with the calm confidence of a prosecutor who knows the jury is already on his side. He didn't shout or grandstand, he simply dropped the accusation and let the weight of it settle. Schiff's reaction, the hesitation, the loss of composure, suggested that Kennedy had struck a nerve. This wasn't Kennedy's first time dismantling a witness or colleague with surgical precision. His background as a Harvard-educated lawyer and former professor gives him an edge in framing questions that sound simple but are nearly impossible to answer cleanly if the target has something to hide. He's done it in Senate hearings, press conferences, and now, most strikingly, in a live televised exchange that left Schiff scrambling. What makes Kennedy particularly dangerous in these moments is his demeanor. He doesn't come across as aggressive or hostile. If anything, he seems almost folksy. But that disarming tone masks a relentless focus on facts. When Schiff tried to deflect, Kennedy didn't take the bait. He just waited, letting the silence amplify the discomfort. In politics, hesitation is often interpreted as guilt, and Schiff's pause became the story as much as the accusation itself. Kennedy's ability to expose weakness in his opponents isn't just about catching them in contradictions, it's about forcing them into a position where they have no good options. If Schiff had denied the claim outright, Kennedy likely had follow-up evidence ready. If Schiff admitted to even a partial truth, it would have validated the attack. Instead, Schiff's frozen response created an opening for speculation, allowing the narrative to spiral beyond the original question. This moment also highlights a broader shift in political strategy. Traditional attacks rely on sound bites and rehearsed zingers, but Kennedy's approach is more methodical. He doesn't need to yell to dominate a conversation. He just needs to ask the right question at the right time. In an era where politicians are trained to pivot and deflect, Kennedy's refusal to let Schiff off the hook was a masterclass in controlled confrontation. The fallout was immediate. Clips of the exchange spread across social media, with commentators dissecting Schiff's reaction frame by frame. Some argued that Kennedy had exposed a genuine vulnerability in Schiff's record. Others insisted it was just skilled psychological warfare. But regardless of interpretation, one thing was undeniable. Kennedy had turned what should have been a routine political exchange into a defining moment, one that left Schiff looking unprepared and, for once, defenseless. Kennedy's precision in this encounter wasn't accidental. It was the result of careful observation, strategic timing, and an understanding of how to weaponize silence. In politics, few things are as damaging as a question that can't be answered, and Kennedy had just proved once again that he knows exactly how to ask them. The most powerful moments in political confrontations often aren't the loud explosions of outrage or the scripted sound bites. They're the silences. The pauses that stretch just a second too long, the flicker of hesitation before a response, the quiet tension of a question left hanging in the air. When Senator John Kennedy confronted Congressman Adam Schiff on live television, it wasn't his words that did the most damage. It was the crushing weight of the silence that followed. Schiff, a veteran politician with a reputation for unflappable composure, is no stranger to high-pressure situations. As one of the most visible figures in the Trump impeachment proceedings, he had spent years in the spotlight, fielding aggressive questioning and hostile commentary without losing his polished demeanor. But Kennedy's approach was different. He didn't engage in a shouting match or a rapid-fire debate. Instead, he made his point, whatever damning accusation or inconvenient truth he had unearthed, and then simply stopped talking. The pause that followed was excruciating. Schiff, normally quick with a rebuttal or a deflection, seemed momentarily paralyzed. His mouth opened slightly, as if he were about to speak, but no words came. His eyes darted just for an instant, betraying the kind of split-second calculation that happens when someone realizes they have no good options. The cameras didn't cut away. The audience didn't interrupt. For those few seconds, the entire scene belonged to Kennedy, who sat perfectly still, watching Schiff with the calm patience of a chess player who already knows how the game ends. In that silence, everything changed. Political communication isn't just about what's said, it's about what's left unsaid. A delayed response in normal conversation might go unnoticed, but in the hyper-scrutinized arena of live television, even a microsecond of hesitation becomes a story. Schiff's pause was a crack in the armor, a rare glimpse of uncertainty from a man who had built his brand on unshakable confidence. And Kennedy knew exactly how to exploit it. He didn't rush to fill the silence. He didn't follow up with another question. He just let it sit there, forcing Schiff to either answer poorly or confirm through his own inability to respond that Kennedy had hit a nerve. This is a tactic Kennedy has mastered over years of high-stakes questioning. Whether in Senate hearings or media appearances, he understands the psychological power of silence better than most of his colleagues. Most politicians are trained to pivot, to redirect, to never let an uncomfortable question linger. But Kennedy refuses to let them. He asks his question, and then he waits. The effect is brutal in its simplicity. If the person across from him has a strong answer, they'll give it immediately. If they don't, the silence does the work for him. In Schiff's case, the pause was fatal. By the time he finally mustered a response, something vague about mischaracterizations and out-of-context attacks, the moment had already been defined by what he hadn't said. The deflection felt weak, the kind of response you give when you have nothing better. And Kennedy, still silent, still watching, had already won. The audience didn't need to hear the details of whatever allegation Kennedy had made. Schiff's reaction told them everything they needed to know. This dynamic plays out in courtrooms, negotiations, and interrogations all the time. The person who controls the silence controls the narrative. Kennedy, with his legal background, understands this instinctively. He doesn't need to grandstand or filibuster to dominate a conversation. He just needs to ask the right question and then let the absence of an answer speak for itself. In this case, Schiff's inability to respond swiftly and confidently turned what might have been a forgettable exchange into a viral moment. The aftermath was predictable. Clips of the confrontation spread instantly, with pundits and social media users dissecting Schiff's hesitation like detectives analyzing a suspect's body language. Some argued that the pause was inconsequential, just a normal beat in conversation. But most recognized it for what it was. A rare, unguarded moment in which Schiff, usually so controlled, had been stripped of his usual defenses. Kennedy hadn't just outmaneuvered him rhetorically. He had exposed him psychologically. Silence is the most underrated weapon in politics. It can't be spun, it can't be edited, it either exists or it doesn't. And in this case, it existed just long enough to turn a routine televised discussion into a defining moment. One that left Schiff looking vulnerable and Kennedy looking like the only man in the room who knew exactly how the game was played. The digital age has transformed political confrontations from fleeting moments into permanent records that spread at the speed of a click. When Senator John Kennedy confronted Congressman Adam Schiff on live television, the exchange lasted mere minutes. But its afterlife in the viral ecosystem ensured maximum damage. Unlike pre-social media political clashes that might fade after a news cycle, this confrontation was dissected, memed, and amplified across platforms before Schiff could even leave the studio. Kennedy's approach was particularly well-suited for the digital fragmentation of modern political discourse. His concise, damning accusation and Schiff's frozen response created the perfect bite-sized clip, under 60 seconds, emotionally charged, and requiring zero context to understand something significant had occurred. The video spread across Twitter, Facebook, and Reddit within minutes, with different ideological silos interpreting it through their preferred lenses. Conservative accounts framed it as long overdue comeuppance, while liberal commentators scrambled to downplay the significance of what they dismissed as a gotcha moment. The platform algorithms rewarded the confrontation handsomely. Engagement. Metrics skyrocketed as users shared, commented, and stitched their own reactions to the clip. On Twitter, the hashtag #GotchaSchiffFrozen trended for hours. YouTube channels specializing in political commentary rushed out reaction videos and deep analyses of Schiff's body language. Meme creators had a field day, superimposing Schiff's startled expression onto freeze-frame jokes about everything from melting ice caps to statue poses. The digital afterlife of this moment far exceeded its original broadcast audience. Kennedy's team clearly understood the rules of this new media landscape. The senator delivered his lines with the kind of crisp, repeatable phrasing that thrives in social media snippets. His composed demeanor, while Schiff faltered, created the perfect visual contrast for side-by-side comparison videos. Even the set design worked in Kennedy's favor. The C-SPAN camera angles captured every micro-expression in high definition, providing endless material for armchair analysts to pore over. Schiff's attempts at damage control only fueled the fire. His tweeted statement denying any wrongdoing came across as defensive in the face of Kennedy's calm accusation. The congressman's supporters tried to change the subject by bringing up Kennedy's past gaffes, but the momentum was unstoppable. By nightfall, the confrontation had generated hundreds of thousands of interactions across platforms, with Schiff's team powerless to contain the narrative. This incident reveals how modern political reputations are made and broken in the digital arena. Traditional media still framed the exchange through their institutional lenses. CNN focused on the factual claims, while Fox News played up the dramatic tension. But the real battle occurred in the decentralized world of social media, where no single authority could control the interpretation. A TikTok comedian's parody of the moment reached more young voters than any newspaper analysis. A Twitch streamer's live reaction drew bigger crowds than cable news panels. The metrics told the story. Kennedy's name saw a 420% spike in Google searches within hours. Schiff's Wikipedia page was edited over 50 times as partisans battled over how to characterize the incident. Online merchandise vendors immediately produced t-shirts and mugs featuring Kennedy's most biting lines. The confrontation had transcended politics to become pop culture, the kind of water cooler moment that gets referenced in late-night monologues and Saturday Night Live sketches. Perhaps most significantly, the viral spread created an alternative record of the event that existed outside official channels. Even if networks downplayed the moment in their recap segments, anyone could pull up the raw footage with a quick search. This permanence changes the calculus of political confrontations. There's no taking back a bad moment when it lives forever, in 1,000 different formats across the internet. Schiff's team couldn't spin their way out of a reaction that millions had already seen with their own eyes. The confrontation's digital footprint also had real-world political consequences. Small-dollar donations to Kennedy's campaign spiked overnight, while Schiff's team was forced to recalibrate their messaging strategy. The incident became a talking point in subsequent interviews and debates, with journalists pressing Schiff for responses he clearly wasn't prepared to give. What might have been a forgettable exchange in another era became an anchor around Schiff's public persona, one that will likely resurface in future attack ads and opposition research. This is the new reality of political combat in the digital age. Moments that once would have lived and died in C-SPAN's niche audience now achieve exponential reach through algorithmic amplification. Politicians must now weigh not just how their words play in the room, but how they'll look when clipped, slowed down, memed and remixed by an army of online creators. Kennedy understood this dynamic instinctively. His confrontation was engineered for virality from the start. Schiff, for all his media savvy, learned the hard way that in today's attention economy, sometimes the camera never stops rolling. Political theater has become so polished, so meticulously rehearsed in recent years that truly unscripted moments have become rare commodities. Most congressional hearings and cable news appearances follow predictable scripts, partisan talking, points, carefully crafted sound bites, and well-practiced evasions. This is precisely why Senator John Kennedy's confrontation with Congressman Adam Schiff stood out so starkly. It represented that rarest of Washington phenomena, a genuinely spontaneous moment where the usual political playbook failed spectacularly. Schiff, a former prosecutor and veteran of countless high-profile hearings, has built his reputation on unflappable professionalism. His performances during the Trump impeachment hearings showcased his ability to remain composed under intense scrutiny. Kennedy, by contrast, has cultivated a different style, one that appears folksy on the surface but conceals a razor-sharp legal mind honed at Harvard Law. Their clash revealed what happens when political theater meets someone who refuses to follow the script. The magic of the exchange lay in its complete departure from standard Washington discourse. There were no prepared statements, no carefully negotiated talking points, no polite parliamentary language to soften the blow. Kennedy went straight for the jugular with a line of questioning Schiff clearly hadn't anticipated. The congressman's usual defenses, the measured tones, the legalistic pivots, the practiced indignation, all failed him in that moment. What viewers witnessed wasn't just a political argument, but something far more compelling, a rare glimpse behind the curtain of political performance. Kennedy's genius in this confrontation was his refusal to play by Washington's unwritten rules of engagement. He didn't allow Schiff to filibuster with lengthy non-answers. He didn't accept the usual deflections about out-of-context claims. Most importantly, he resisted the urge to follow up immediately when Schiff froze, understanding that the silence itself was more damning than any additional questioning could be. This created that rarest of television moments, authentic human reaction rather than political calculation. The power dynamics were fascinating to observe. Schiff, accustomed to controlling hearings through procedural maneuvers and rhetorical dominance, suddenly found himself on unfamiliar terrain. Kennedy's approach stripped away all the usual political scaffolding. No staff whispering in earpieces, no prearranged allies waiting to jump in with supportive questions. Just two politicians, one uncomfortable truth, and a national audience watching real-time vulnerability from a figure who had built his brand on impenetrability. This confrontation revealed an important truth about modern political communication. The more polished political figures become, the more damaging it is when that polish cracks. Schiff's carefully constructed image as the unflappable, morally certain prosecutor took a significant hit precisely because his reaction was so visibly unscripted. In an era where voters increasingly distrust slick political performances, Kennedy's ability to force an authentic moment, however uncomfortable, carried tremendous persuasive power. The aftermath showed why such unguarded moments have become so rare in modern politics. Schiff's team immediately went into damage control mode, issuing statements and attempting to reframe the exchange. Pundits on both sides rushed to declare victory for their preferred combatant, but none of this could undo the raw power of that initial, unvarnished moment, a reminder that for all the stagecraft of modern politics, nothing resonates quite like seeing the mask slip, if only for a few seconds. Kennedy's approach in this confrontation points to an emerging style of political communication that may prove particularly effective in our current media environment. By combining substantive preparation with a willingness to break protocol, he created must-see television that transcended typical partisan food fights. The exchange didn't just play to political junkies, it became water cooler talk precisely, because it departed so dramatically from what audiences have come to expect from political discourse. What makes this moment particularly significant is how it exposes the vulnerability of over-rehearsed political figures in an era that increasingly values authenticity. Schiff's hesitation and loss of composure stood out precisely because he's normally so polished. Kennedy's calm, almost conversational delivery of what was clearly a devastating accusation worked precisely because it broke the mold of hyperbolic political rhetoric. In this sense, the confrontation may signal a shift in what constitutes effective political communication, away from slick soundbites and toward more genuine, if uncomfortable, exchanges. The long-term implications are worth considering. If more politicians follow Kennedy's lead in prioritizing authentic confrontation over performative grandstanding, we may see a fundamental change in how political debates are conducted. Of course, the risk is that others will attempt to replicate the style without the substance, leading to more political theater of a different kind. But for one brief moment, viewers got to see what happens when the usual political scripts are tossed aside, and two skilled practitioners are forced to engage in something resembling a real conversation rather than a staged performance. The confrontation between Senator John Kennedy and Congressman Adam Schiff represents more than just another viral political moment. It exposes the raw nerve of modern political discourse. In an era where politicians increasingly communicate through carefully crafted tweets, pre-approved talking points, and heavily edited video messages, Kennedy's surgical strike and Schiff's uncharacteristic freeze offered something increasingly rare: unscripted authenticity. This wasn't political theater as usual, but rather a moment when the polished facade of Washington politics cracked under the weight of an unexpected challenge. What makes this exchange particularly significant is how it reveals the changing rules of political engagement. Kennedy demonstrated that in today's media environment, a single well-timed question, followed by strategic silence, can be more devastating than hours of rhetorical grandstanding. Schiff's reaction, meanwhile, showed how vulnerable even the most seasoned politicians become when their carefully constructed personas meet unexpected scrutiny. The moment succeeded precisely because it broke from the predictable back and forth that has left so many Americans disillusioned with political discourse. The viral aftermath underscores how fundamentally the digital age has transformed political accountability. Where once such moments might have been softened by time or filtered through institutional media gatekeepers, today's ecosystem ensures they live on in perpetuity, remixed, analyzed, and weaponized across platforms. This creates both opportunities and dangers. While it allows for greater transparency and public scrutiny, it also rewards confrontation over substance and simplifies complex matters into shareable moments. Perhaps most importantly, this confrontation highlights the growing public appetite for authenticity in politics. Voters are increasingly rejecting polished performances in favor of unfiltered moments that reveal something genuine about their representatives. Kennedy's success came not from outshouting his opponent, but from forcing a rare moment of unguarded reaction. In doing so, he exposed the vulnerability of political figures who have become too reliant on scripted responses and media training. As we move forward, this moment may be remembered as a turning point in political communication strategies. It proves that in an age of digital saturation and public skepticism, the most effective political weapons are often precision rather than volume, authenticity rather than polish, and uncomfortable silence rather than rehearsed rhetoric. The lesson for politicians is clear. In today's environment, you can control your message right up until the moment you can't, and that moment may be the one that defines you. Ultimately, this confrontation serves as a reminder that despite all the stagecraft and spin that dominate modern politics, there remains nothing more compelling and nothing more dangerous than an unscripted moment of truth. As the digital world continues to erode politicians' control over their narratives, we may see more such moments that cut through the noise and reveal the fallible humans beneath the political personas. Whether this leads to greater accountability or simply more performative confrontation remains to be seen, but one thing is certain: the rules of political engagement are changing, and not everyone has gotten the memo.